Dara Kalima, the community poet, chat with folks who speak on behalf of their respective communities. So welcome back, everyone, to this week's episode. Sorry if I sound a little hoarse. I have been working and which required a lot of my voice. And then I have been wedding. I went to a wedding, so things have been crazy. So my voice is a little hoarse, but I hope it just makes me sound sexier and not crazier. So that said, bear with me for this episode. I know it's a little different intro, but that's okay. Y'all are gonna rock with me anyway, because if y'all made it to this episode, y'all have been listening for a while. So that all said, I have a really cool, wonderful new friend of mine coming to speak to y'all today. I don't even know how to introduce them. I will say I got I'm glad. I was told multiple times that before I brought them onto this show, I needed to read their book. And because the book would guide part of this conversation. Unfortunately, I read the book a couple of weeks ago, so I'm already forgetting parts of it. And I didn't earmark the parts of the book that said the parts that were relevant to this conversation, but that's okay. I even messaged them and I was like, I love this poem. And I read this one poem like 3 times because whew, did it resonate. So I'm very excited and glad that I did read their book. I don't want to say more than that, other than just to say that their book is wonderful and they are a stellar writer, and they're just a really wonderful, heartfelt individual. And I understand why people really like them. And I'm gonna tell you, I actually don't like people, and I'm not saying that in a bad way, but like I'm an introvert, and if you see me at places, I don't really want to talk to strangers. But this stranger, when I was introduced to them, were really nice and warm. And I was like, oh, they really like me, and I like them, and that's really weird. Oh my gosh, they're nice and friendly. It's uncomfortable because I don't like talking to people in like crowds, but they were just really lovely. So I'm glad that I'm getting to know them better and better as time continues. So that all said, that's my very weirdly emotional, weirdly rambly introduction. But I didn't say the normal stuff I normally say. So if you've been listening to this show for a little while, then you should know that that was new, and I'm doing better at changing what I say about people. So, hey, new friend, would you please tell folks your name?
Hello, new friend. That was so sweet and genuine, and I feel the same way. Thank you. Honored to be here. My name is Jenny Pisani. Yeah.
Awesome. I've never said your name before. Pisani, the last name, right?
Pisani.
Okay, awesome. So Jenny Pisani. I like how it rhymes. It's very lyrical and yes. Okay. So would you please be so kind as to tell people your pronouns?
Sure. My pronouns are she, her, hers.
Awesome. And would you tell people about yourself?
Sure. So I am Jenny. I'm a poet, but I'm also a visual artist, a painter, and I love to sing and play music. But poetry is at the core of me. I'm a teaching artist and the director of education for an arts education nonprofit on Staten Island. I am a returned Peace Corps volunteer, which I'm sure we'll get into that story. I lived in Cambodia for a long time. But now I'm back on Staten Island, where I'm from. I'm a native New Yorker, and I am an Italian American, which is really important to me, part of my story. But yeah, I think those are the big things.
Were you born in Staten Island?
I was born here, but I was the first of my siblings to be born here. My parents and the rest of my relatives really are from Brooklyn,
Okay.
and then from Italy after them.
Really? So who was the, I'm gonna need you to say that again to me. When did people come from Italy?
So I'm a third generation Italian American. So my great grandparents came from Italy, and then they settled in Brooklyn. And then my grandparents and my parents were born there. My brother was born there. And then my parents came over to Staten Island after in the 90s. So I was born in 90. I'm 32 now.
I won't tell you how old that just made me feel, but wonderful. awesome. That's like really close to in relation to the migration over here. So that's actually really, really cool. Um, so I'm well, you said the Italian American part, but what communities do you represent?
Yeah, sure. So definitely an Italian American. I think I also represent the Staten Island poetry community. I definitely am, an ambassador in certain ways for the Peace Corps. I've done that before. Um, and I think I represent the teaching artist community. And also just I think I try to represent the divine feminine at times, or those of us with a little bit more of a understanding of what's beyond us through the world, and try to be um, a person in that way, if that makes sense.
Mm, okay. I'm gonna have to dig into some of this a little bit more. I was taking notes. I did better this time. I don't always take notes. Like if you watch some of my other episodes, I'm like, oh, I had these like 5 questions and I forgot to take notes. So I actually have notes written down now. I'm learning. I'm learning as I do this podcast. So which community are we specifically talking about today?
Hmm. I think, the poet in me is always with me in all of those spaces and all of those communities. Um, I think, my Peace Corps story has a lot in there, and that informed a lot of my first book, Alchemy. Um, so we can dive in there, and then I think the other parts will all kind of
Come
weave in.
together. So tell me, why the Peace Corps, how the Peace Corps, please.
All right. So to be completely fair, I don't remember where the seed was planted, but I can remember being in high school and researching the Peace Corps and trying to see, what were the requirements for you to join it. And I remember seeing you needed a bachelor's degree or relevant experience. So in my mind, I was like, all right, this might be something I do after college. And then after college, I was in college. I had this great scholarship through Macaulay of New York City, so I was able to study abroad for free, which was great because my family doesn't have money at all. And so with that, I was able to go to Australia, and I studied abroad in Australia, and it really kind of cracked open the world for me and made me realize a lot. And one of those things was how much is possible and how small the world actually can be, and you can travel. And so that, I think, informed me after college. And I had a similar experience. My family did not want me to join. At the time I was in a relationship, the guy did not want me to join, and I put it off. But eventually me and that guy broke up. And then I was midway through my master's at this point, and I felt it in my body that now is the time. I'm going to finish my master's. I'm going to apply now. So by the time I am through this process, because it takes about a year for the application. So I finished my master's degree, got all my licenses as an educator, and then thankfully I was accepted into the Peace Corps for Cambodia, and I left 2015.
Wow. So wait, your master's is in education?
Yeah. So I have a bachelor's in psychology and in creative writing, and then my master's is in secondary education and English.
Wow. See, I knew I liked you.
Thanks.
I have a master's in educational theater. So
Oh, that's awesome.
yeah, but I purposefully didn't do the licensing version. I did the colleges and communities because that was where my heart was.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So, and I also was like, my mom was an educator and she was like, don't be a teacher.
I didn't plan on it. I didn't plan on education. I think I chose that master's, and I was sort of settling at the time because I was in that relationship that was really not good for me, and I didn't really see much more for my life. And I was like, well, I guess I'll be a teacher then. I don't regret it at all because it has actually opened up so much for me
Mm-hmm.
Think I still want to pursue potentially some degrees and more in other ways, but yeah, got my master's and I am a certified DOE English teacher, but don't really want to participate in the system in that way, but I have it. So
That is amazing. So I know, so if alchemy is amazing,
thank you.
alchemy is amazing. I did enjoy the section that's clearly about your time there, because it's a change in the tone that's clearly tells us we're in a different place. Especially the part about the girl, remember me. That
Yeah.
was, it was so beautifully written and heartbreaking, but not heartbreaking. It's something, there's something about that poem that you're like, yeah, it's nostalgic. That's what it is. Because like nostalgia has this, like, at least for me, the word nostalgia has this joyful sadness to
Yeah.
it. And that's what that poem has, like, right? Like it's like, yeah, it was such a, like, I I remember her to some extent. And
Yeah.
I said I would remember her. She wanted to be remembered, but I couldn't make a full promise of that either. you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us about Cambodia.
Sure. It was a beautiful and devastating experience at the same time. So with the Peace Corps, you have like it's typically a 2-year service. So uh I was an English teacher and a teacher trainer at a village. I lived with a Cambodian family in their home and worked at the school and did a lot of different kinds of projects. So much happened, and it was really so special because it just really helped me to break down sort of ways in which I interact and engage with people, not only from absorbing some of that culture and I mean the language and all of that stuff, it shifts you. And I have such a greater appreciation and understanding of, the history that they went through. And I identified a lot with, I didn't choose Cambodia when I applied for the Peace Corps. They gave it to me based on my, background and when I was available to leave. So I just happened to be placed there. But I couldn't have been anywhere better suited for me. And I
Mm.
identified with it a lot because it's a country that's been through a lot of trauma and they're still recovering. But with that, they have such a I think trauma humbles you in a real way. It can. And they were so open, and I was grateful and I was lucky to be in a community that really accepted me. And yeah, it was a really special time, that those 2 years in the village that I lived in. I was in Takayu province in Angroka, which is like a small little village in the south. And then after that, after a very interesting, unexpected series of events, after I finished my 2 years, I got a job offer in the capital city in
Mm.
Phnom Penh, where I worked at a medical university, developing their English department. And I was there for another 2 years. And then I eventually, yeah,
And was that through the Peace Corps too, or?
that was like after I finished my service, I stayed in Cambodia working independently.
Wow.
Yeah, so I was there for 4 years altogether. 4.5.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really cool.
That's impressive.
Thank you. It's hard. It's one of those things like you just kind of go and you do it and you open this door and then there's another door behind it and you just find yourself somewhere for 4 years. And then a lot happened, but I would have done it again. And then it just came to a point where I felt it, that it was time to return home. Um, and I'm glad I did, because it was at the end of 2019 I came back,
Hmm.
and thankfully I was at home here, and then the pandemic happened. So I'm still I came with a lot in my body, mind, and heart and soul. I came home with a lot, and I
Mm-hmm.
didn't get to truly process it all in the way I needed to.
Mm.
Um, so now here we are 3 years later in 2022, and it still feels like I just came back not long ago, but so much has happened in between as well. But yeah.
So, how was it adjusting in terms of just how how was it adjusting? It's a totally different world.
Like
Yeah.
it was, so there's, it was a totally different world. In the So where I lived, at first you get a little bit of language training.
Mm,
You get like 2 months when you get there. You have like Peace Corps training. So all the volunteers are in one location going through different training. I was there with the English teachers, but then there was another cohort of community health educators
mhm,
that they were like in the cohort, but doing different things. So we all were together at that time doing language training, cultural training, going to see different important spaces in the country. And so that's really hard because you're also living with a different family, and
mm,
my family didn't speak English. Um, and so you're kind of just sitting there at the dinner table and you can't speak each other's languages.
mm,
So I think that was tough, but also I learned a lot. And your brain starts to adapt after you're surrounded by things. So there's the language adaptation, there's the cultural dynamic of I'm a woman, I have tattoos, I'm tall, my boobs are bigger than the majority of their heads. It's crazy. So like that, and that in itself, being an American, a white woman, like I found myself in spaces where I was the outsider a
mhm,
lot of times. And like I was the only person who looked like me for miles. And I think more people who aren't people of color should experience that, because it gives you an experience where it's like yeah, it's challenging. And I think so many people, especially on like Staten Island, for people of color, like move through the world in that way. And it taught me a lot in that sense. And it was uncomfortable. It was very uncomfortable.
mhm,
um then there's the running water situation. um in both homes I lived in, there wasn't any running water. Both of the bathrooms were outside. You've got like a squatty potty in the ground, a Turkish toilet essentially. You're showering with a bucket,
mhm,
and could be rainwater, could be well water, filtering all my water. um Foods were different, but
mhm.
uh
The thing
but
that terrifies me is the squatty potty, and it's not like, and it's like I understand, but I have arthritis,
yeah,
so
yeah.
that terrifies me. Like anywhere that I would have to travel to use it. It doesn't matter. It's not a thing against any other place. I understand that it's even better for your stomach and
You gotta get
insides.
down and you gotta get up.
But the idea of like, I don't know if I could get down.
Yeah, yeah, that was
And
real.
I'm definitely gonna have problems getting up.
Yeah. I mean, there were some places, like some of my friends did actually have a Western toilet, but wouldn't have running water with that. So you'd still have to like bucket water in. And there was
Mm-hmm.
accommodations at times. Like one of my closest friends from the Peace Corps, her name is Tree. And at the time she was 65 years old. And that lady did the 2 years with me.
Mm-hmm.
And, she'll come back into this story as we go on. But yeah, like the running water stuff was weird, getting sick a lot, food poisoning,
Mm-hmm.
chamber pots, because my bathroom was outside. I lived on the top floor with my family. And, at night, you can't go out to the bathroom really because you might see a snake or something, or scorpion.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to just pee in a pot and deal with that in the morning. Um, Homesickness. then,
Mm,
being away for so long, life doesn't stop at home either. So you're
mhm,
kind of like going through your own thing at where you are, but at home, your family, your friends, people are getting married, people are dying, people are having babies. So you're missing. Then like holidays, Cambodia has like 2 seasons, and it's dry and wet and it's hot all the time. Um, so there's that adjustment too, to the
mhm.
weather, to the climate. Yeah, it's a completely like you get hit from all angles. It was an absolute
Yeah.
challenge. And I think a lot of people who sign up for it, um, like I was kind of hungry for that discomfort too.
Mm,
Um, and I think it made me a better person and appreciate a lot more. And it broke my heart open in so many ways that I think I can feel more, have a
mm.
greater sense of compassion or understanding, um, and gratitude.
That's amazing. That
Thank
is
you.
that is a yeah. Um, I realize that when people talk about certain things about just travel, generally speaking, I was like, oh, I'm very Western. I'm very privileged. I have to acknowledge that. Like I have to own my limitations on some of this stuff.
Yeah. And that's good.
And that's
That's good to know.
yeah, yeah. Because I was like, my knees are not made for some things right now. We were just doing the Cupid shuffle last night at a wedding, and they were like, "How low can you go?" And I was just like, I can't. you know?
I'm staying right here. As low as
Exactly.
it
I
gets.
cannot go low.
Yeah.
That's the answer.
Yeah. You could do other things. You could,
Exactly.
those elbows.
You know? So it's interesting. But like I don't judge other places the same way. Like I know other people like, no, that's horrible. And I'm like, no, that's other people's lives.
Yeah.
But I also just know what my body at this point in juncture can and cannot do.
Yeah.
Um, and it's just interesting. It's interesting as I watch things and people talk about the way people bathe and just all that those different conversations that are always present right now, because we have nothing better to do with our time. It's so like as you talked about the bathing with the stuff, I'm like, oh, yeah, I could do that. Like I could probably do that. But the bathroom would be the part where I'm like,
It was a lot. And then it's hard a lot too. Like, if you're squatting and you're sick, it's just there was definitely not a good time. There was times it was not fun.
yeah, I
Definitely
can
not
imagine.
fun.
I can imagine. So can you tell me a little bit more about the cultural training? You mentioned that, and I'm intrigued by that.
Yeah, sure. So, you know, um, Western culture is very different from Eastern culture in a lot of different ways. And something that, we kind of had to navigate a lot was the way that we can be, really direct at times when we say things, or like we expect direct answers. But in Cambodia and in a lot of other, Eastern places, it's sort of like more indirect, like you're going to talk around something,
Mm,
which was interesting, and it could be frustrating at times, but it gave me another way to sort of, you had to navigate that, especially as, for me, I was the first volunteer in my village to be there. And
oh
I was
wow.
working at a school because usually they cycle through like 3 different people. So you have your
Hmm.
first volunteer, and then that after their service, you have a second, and then a third, and then they usually let that place calm for a while and go spread the love. But I was the first one, and I was working with a school that was predominantly male dominated. All the English teachers were men. Um, and I had to kind of navigate that. And, not all people can be trusted, and not all people's intentions, and just really kind of learning how to dress. Yeah, I used to have to wear, a traditional Cambodian sampot, which is like a long skirt, and
Hmm.
how to like put that on, um and how to greet people and speak to people, because with the language you're going to use different kind of words for a different person of a different age.
Hmm.
So like that stuff. But also time is also a culturally defined thing. Like, we are from New York, we're from America, we take time very seriously. Time is money, right? And like, I'm a teacher, so like, you got to be on time, but
Mm-hmm.
that gets thrown out the window there. And you've got to learn how to roll with it. You just have to have a lot of patience and not be judgmental, but also kind of, it was a part of, that was a part of the culture too, like the way we used time. um and then just being one kind of person in the village, because you're representing the Peace Corps,
Mm-hmm.
you're almost a cultural diplomat. But then, you should be able to take that mask off at some point and go into the capital with your friends, but not get too wasted either. And, how to be safe in a country that has a lot of danger,
Mm-hmm.
and how to look out for each other. So, yeah, there was it made me understand culture in a different way too, and also identity. you know Part of, we had like a staging in Seattle for a couple days before we all left for the Cambodia. It's kind of your last chance to be like, I'm in it or I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
And something we did, which was an identity web, and I use it in my classes a lot, and it's just a great exercise. And it's basically, you write your name down in the middle, and then you sort of allow for whatever parts of you feel like inform your identity. All those communities we talked about, all the different things that make me who I am, I write it all down. And I had it on my wall the whole time I was there, because your identity is challenged so much. Um, and so learning how to hold on, learning what's important for you to hold on to, and what things you can kind of give or take. So yeah, it was a long
Wow.
answer.
So
Mhm.
wait, when you were acclimating in those, you said 2 months or 2 weeks? I can't even remember.
So you have 2 months
Okay.
of Peace Corps training where we were all together. And then after those 2 months, you get placed in your permanent sites for
Okay.
2 years.
So during those 2 months, they sort of teach you some of those different norms about, okay. And then where's the clothes come from?
So, something else that I really got to learn and understand more, it was community is significantly more important in those kinds of places, because you
Mm-hmm.
don't have a mall necessarily to go to. You don't have, a supermarket, but you do have your fruit lady who always has the fruit you want at this time. And you do have tailors who have fabric, who will measure you and make you custom clothes for actually really cheap. you know
Mm-hmm.
and you do it's more of a direct transaction. I love that. And
Mm-hmm.
that's also taught me a lot more too, of how to use where your money can really go, and how to
Mm-hmm.
put money directly into pockets versus into a system. So you would go to a tailor, and she would measure you and sew you up some stuff. For me, I mean, I'm 5'9", um a curvy woman, and I did not fit into typical Cambodian woman clothes. So I had to get a lot of things like made for me. Um, so that's really usually someone made it for me.
Oh wow. Okay, awesome. That's really, I was like, because you said you had to change clothes. I'm just, which I assumed to some extent, right? But it was just like, but then what happened? Like, how did that happen? Like,
Taylor.
um, that is, so did you get to, that is awesome. So the people who were with you for those 2 months,
Yeah.
are they nearby in other villages?
So there was like I said, there was two cohorts of us, but in
Mhm.
one cohort, there was two groups.
Yeah.
The English teachers and then the community health volunteers. So they had all the English teachers in one kind of village, and then they had all the community health educators in another village that wasn't very far from each
Okay.
other. But yeah, I had my friend Doug lived at the house next to me with a different family, and we
Okay.
all had in the Peace Corps, and this will come up later. We all got a bicycle, because
Mm.
that's how you got around. You weren't allowed to ride on like a motorcycle, which was a typical way to get around. You had to ride your bike. So there was just kind of like, for some of us, it was weird in a way, because it was hard. We would be biking, the Peace Corps volunteers would be biking, and then next to us would pass a bunch of, Mormons. And kind of seeing how different groups of people kind of take up a lot of space in these developing countries with different intentions, and really having to check, what the hell am I doing here? And am I it had me questioning a lot of my purpose there, and checking myself so that I stayed on course.
So how did you navigate that?
A lot of self-reflection. I mean, I went into the Peace Corps knowing I felt such a true calling, that, and I felt a calling to go, because although I've had challenges in my life, I've been privileged enough to have a great education, and I feel really thankful for that. And I felt a calling to offer that in whatever way I could, but also wanting to educate myself in the ways that I could become a better human,
Mm.
and all that stuff, but also checking myself that I wasn't going into a white savior complex, and making sure that I remained humble, and like even questioning myself. Damn, I struggled with this, and I still struggle with this, of like, I'm an English teacher, and now, I mean, in America I'm more of a creative writing English teacher, but
Mhm.
there it was an English language teacher, which I did do some poetry stuff after. But struggling with the concept of, I am teaching the colonizers language, and is this what I should be doing? Is this it? But then going back and having that conversation with the Cambodian teachers I worked with, and understanding that it was more of a tool that I could offer, because if students had that language capacity, they would have more job opportunities, and they would be able to do more if they had this skill. It's not the only language that they could learn, and they could learn many other things that we could learn together, and we did. And it wasn't just English training, but checking myself on that. um Towards the end of my service, after I went through a lot, I wrote down and reflected on what my values are and were, and for each of those values, what were active things I could do to support that, and just returning to that. And also, at the back of my book, I don't know if you saw, there's this Walt Whitman quote that has always been a compass for me. um, and I've had that on every wall I've ever lived in, and it's always been something to guide me. um, yeah. So it was a
Yeah.
constant process, and it still is. I, always want to make sure I check myself as an educator and as a white person anywhere in the world, making sure I'm not taking up too much space versus offering that space for people to use their own voices. Um,
I mean, it is very important, and it's a tricky one. You know, the church in which I am currently affiliated with, I will not say their name because I'm in part walking away.
Mhm.
Um, but they go to South Africa every year, and I'm just like, I can't do it.
Yeah.
And more than anything, I would love to go visit the continent, but I cannot do it. And I cannot do it because I cannot, as much as as a Christian, as a lifelong Christian, if you ask me why I survive anything, or why I'm still laughing, or why, it's because of my faith, but it is, and that's how I will always be able to evangelize, is living my life, and therefore being able to answer that question. but and live it by example. But it is not me going, hey, Jenny, do you believe in the word of God? Like it's not, that doesn't work for everyone. It doesn't work. For some people maybe, but not for everyone, And so the idea of going into spaces that are not maybe of this faith naturally really just feels like we're still doing the same old thing that other people were doing before. And I cannot jive with that. I appreciate the helping of a community, but not that way. Like not, for me, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And so I at this point almost can't even donate to my friends who go and do it anymore, because it's just like, it doesn't sit right for me.
Yeah.
Just like, why are we going into these cultures and tampering with them in this way? What's wrong with their original belief?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I appreciate that. And so like, so I went to NYU, and NYU did have programs that went to the continent. I don't remember where, and I really wanted to go, but money and time. And when I was at NYU, there was no time and there was no money. So I didn't have the ability to do it when I was in the program, because my program, because I wasn't doing the licensing, was only 3 semesters. So it was too short, where if you were doing licensing, it was 4. But they at least did like theater of the oppressed type work over there.
Yeah.
So therefore you can uncover your own oppression. It's not me saying you're oppressed. It's me saying, is there something in your society you want to possibly change? Now that's different.
Yeah.
That's and that's not me going, there's something wrong in your culture, find it. That's me saying, is there anything here that you don't like how it's working?
Yeah.
It's a different angle. It's a different conversation. It's me not prescribing that there's a problem. It's you saying that I don't like carrying this thing all the time. Why isn't someone else carrying it? It's you saying that there's this thing, and then practicing that rehearsal. But it's not me identifying the problem with your community, because I may not even think that's a problem, and or it may not, like, it just may not register that way. So I think it's so important and interesting, and I'm thank you for bringing that up. But I also want to thank you for something different that is something I talk about in the episode that we aired last week. So when people watch this, it's clearly a couple of months ago probably, but it was the conversation I had with my friend who talked on behalf of the anti-racism community. Part of the reason why I brought her on the show is that of all the white folks I invite into interview so far, no one identified a culture or anything about themselves that did not make them, that made them identify as anything that wasn't like, none of them identified as anything that may have made them white, whether it was their culture, whether it was their ethnic, I mean, I'm white, or any, like, whatever it was. And so you out of gate saying like, I'm Italian American, was like, look at you, Jenny. Look at you, Jenny.
Thank you.
And so that was like, see, again, more reasons to like Jenny. So, but I appreciate that, because that question, and I'm not ever saying, well, you didn't answer that question correctly. It's whatever you identify as, but there is there's a heightened level of awareness to that is also part of a community that you're part of, or an access or whatever. And being aware of that and doing the work that you're doing absolutely is so important. Or the work education wise as an educator, or even back in Cambodia. So I want to give you props for that, just for always asking that question.
Thank you. I mean, there's a lot more to that conversation, just about whiteness and about that privilege, and just some of the things that I've seen and I didn't really fully grasp until I was in a situation like the situations I was in, that I can never unsee again. And I carry it, and I try to talk to my family about these things, and like, talk to them about bleaching cream and all that stuff, and seeing it, and seeing how mothers spoke to their dark-skinned daughters, and just seeing it up close like that. It was hard, but with that awareness I have now, I move through the world a little bit differently. And I'm
Yeah.
grateful for it, as hard as it was.
That whole bleaching cream and the anti-blackness even within non-black communities is crazy. One of my first mentee is same shade as me, but she's Bengali. Um and the stuff I've had to learn from her about that in her community has been like,
Yeah.
okay, I didn't know. I've learned. But it's wild. It's wild. That proximity to whiteness stuff is insanity. And it's impacted so many places. So that all said, are you still friends with the people that you were like in Peace Corps with? And
Yeah. Some of and it's crazy because like, we've definitely made a conscious effort to stay in touch. A good solid group of us. Because there was maybe like 100. I'm gonna say there was about 100 people in our cohort, but at the end, maybe there was like 30 of us left who
mhm,
really finish, who make it to the 2 years. Um, and people go through so much at that time, and for the people who can stay in touch and stay connected, it is so important for me and for my friends. I think for a lot of other people who do something like the Peace Corps, whether that's being in the army or something, people who are removed and go through some shit, and they go through it together and then come back. My family never visited me. I have two friends who did come and see me, but a lot of people have zero comprehension for what it was like. But for my Peace Corps friends, when we get together, it's a part of me. That I went through so much that it informed who I am.
mm,
And being with those people, it is so soothing, and it feels so affirming and comforting that it integrates a lot. It
mm,
helps to be back in America and seeing someone who went through things with you there at that place and knows what you're talking about and can speak that language too. Like, so I just over the past summer, I was in Tennessee, and one of my friends got married to another Peace Corps volunteer, and they rented a cabin in the Smoky Mountains, and we all, she was in Cambodia with me, he was in Peace Corps Mozambique, and he had a
mm.
bunch of Peace Corps friends too. So it was all of us in this mountain, and it was just a beautiful bunch of hippies in a cabin together. And it was a great time. And not everyone who joins the Peace Corps is a solid person. There was definitely people who joined with other motivations. There was definitely people who came
Mm,
in and took a lot more than they gave. But
mm,
for the people that I've been able to be so lucky, we say we're like government issued friends. For the core group of the people that I have in my heart, they're family. They are family, and I want to be in touch with them for the rest of my life. I
wow,
plan on it.
that's that's beautiful. So did you stay with the same family for the 2 years?
Yeah, yeah. I stayed with the same family for 2 years, and it's interesting because I didn't get emotionally close to them,
Mhm,
but they took care of me so well. And I really bonded a lot more with the people in the community, my
mhm,
neighbors. The I lived really close to a market, and that's where I was all the time, just hanging out in the market. And those people really just they became family too.
mm.
Um, but yeah, I was with the same family for 2 years.
Wow. That's so beautiful. So leading into one of my questions, what is something beautiful about the community, whether it is the Cambodian community that you were in or your Peace Corps community, or maybe answering for both?
Um, so I want to speak first for the Cambodian community, and
Mhm,
like what it's a function of their language, but
Mhm.
also a function of the way they operate collectively, and something I have absolutely integrated in me. When you are speaking to, if I go to the market and I'm gonna buy some dragon fruit, I'm gonna say like, sister, can I have 2 of those fruits over there? Or if there's a older woman selling some like fried banana, I'm
Mhm.
gonna say like, grandma, can I have that? How much is that? You're gonna speak to each other from a place of family. You're gonna speak
Mm.
to each other as brother, sister, aunt, uncle, grandmother, grandfather, or little brother, little sister. And that's just how you talk to each other. You don't really use each other's names. You use more of that kind of condition when you're speaking. And I think that impacts the way you connect with people around you. You're not looking at them as other. You're really looking at them as like, they're my human family. Um, and so that, I think, was one of the most beautiful parts for me. And I mean, my Peace Corps friends and I will talk to each other that way too, you know.
Mm.
Um, but that definitely, I think, is one of the most beautiful thing. And for my Peace Corps friends and my Peace Corps family, um, I think something that we really share, because of what we went through, because of all, you kind of heard how difficult it can be adjusting physically. We just have such a level of humility that nothing's off the table to talk about. We would
Mm.
get together for like lunch and be like, how many times have you took a shit today? Like, what's your poop like? Um, so it humbled us. A lot of my Peace Corps friends, I feel like, are really humble people. Now there's also, like I said, there's some people who are really kind of will take it in and move through the world differently than that. But for my family and for the Cambodians too, that sense of humility, I think, is really beautiful. And it's something that I've come to just really, something I appreciate in people a lot. I'm really turned off by people with arrogance and hubris. Um, can't help it now.
Mm. Mm. Felt that. Um, is there a unique fact about the community you can share? I mean, you sort of touched on that a little bit about the Cambodian one, but whatever you feel worth
Hmm.
sharing,
Um, about the Cambodian community.
whichever one. I'm open.
Um, so I would say this is a unique fact for the Cambodians that I've known. They really value like eating food that and knowing where that food comes from. Like,
Mm.
these are oranges from Battambang province, and like celebrating that and sharing, like, try
Mm.
this, eat this. Or like, this rice I grew in my rice field. Or, all this food came from this place. And I loved like, I don't think we really think about that. I didn't think about that so much in America. I mean, they had like that farm to table kind of bougie thing that was happening here,
Mhm.
but to know who is growing your food, where it's coming from, and valuing it in that way seasonally too. Like, you can only get mangoes or mango season at this time. And all of that, I think that really taught me a lot. Such food was such a big part of their culture, and even just as someone connecting,
Mhm.
because we all got to eat. Everybody has to eat. So yeah, I would say the food appreciation. That's something that comes to mind.
Awesome. So then, is there a fun fact about yourself you're
Hmm.
willing to share?
Fun fact about myself. I think so I would say like 2 things, and they both have to do with my hands.
Okay.
I have mastered how to really clap loudly. And I don't know how that happened, but I think a big part of it had to do with being a teacher. and
Mm.
wanting kids to really know, like being able to make a loud clap, or like being an audience member at all these like events and stuff. So I've got that. And then also I can make really great fart sounds just with my hand as well. Do you wanna see?
I love that you want to show this skill off. Go
I
ahead.
So I'll start with just the clap, and I hope it's not too loud. But and I guess I have big hands, but you gotta like kind of get the meat part of it. So
That is really loud.
yeah, it's really loud. And then oh, excuse me.
I love it.
It's unexpected a lot, but it's a skill. I don't know. It's a fun fact.
It is. It's a super cool skill.
Thanks.
I love it.
Thank you for appreciating that.
It made me laugh. So
Good. It's good. I learned that in middle school. Some kid taught me. You gotta get your mouth into this pocket spot.
okay.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Now we know. That is amazing. So is there anything that frustrates you about and I think so in this you can choose not to answer this. I may be leading you into an answer and you can go a different angle, do whatever you need to, but you have mentioned a few times people who join for the wrong reasons. So or take more. I would love to know more about that if you can, but if you don't, whatever. But the question essentially is something that frustrates you about the state of your community.
Yeah, so definitely something that frustrates me is I think people who join with maybe not the best intentions, whether that's more self-serving, and I've struggled with that concept too. Like I don't think there's anything as 100% altruism. You're always gonna do something for something back in return, even if it is volunteering so that you can feel better,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever it is. But for some of those people, like, and the thing that comes present, to the forefront of my mind when I'm really saying that, what I'm thinking of is there was definitely, and maybe there's some women who have done this stuff too, but there was a lot of people who joined the Peace Corps seeking a partner from that host country. So there was absolutely men specifically who joined the Peace Corps seeking a Cambodian woman. And whether or not that was through traditional dating means, but also you have to understand, joining the Peace Corps, going to these countries, you're coming with a privilege.
Mm-hmm.
There's a power dynamic at play. So there was also men who joined and would abuse the sex tourism industry. There was a lot of sex trafficking that happens in Cambodia. It's very easy to find prostitutes. And I know for a fact a lot of guys would abuse that. And it's just disgusting. It's just disgusting because it's so opposite of what your function should be in this country. And sometimes the Peace Corps would catch these things and sometimes they wouldn't. So there was definitely people who were, kicked out, sent back home because of, nefarious activities. But there was definitely people who also finished service who had done those things. So that's just, I know it's disgusting to think about and talk about. And I also have friends who fell in love naturally with a Cambodian person and got married, and that happens too. There's nothing, you can't, change who you fall in love with, but I don't think it was their main intention. There was definitely people who that was why they joined, and they snuck in and through somehow. So that was disgusting.
Oh, that's really disappointing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
I have a,
icky,
yeah,
complicated.
I was like, I have a lot of feelings about that. But yeah, that's really, y'all do a lot of screening to get into it too. So
Background checks and all that stuff, and many multiple interviews. You got to jump through a million hoops. But, you know, and like that's not to say I'll be the first one to explain how horny you are
mhm.
when you are out in the middle of nowhere,
No, of course.
you know. But to take advantage of your power in that way, um, it's just not what we were there for. It's just not what we were there for, and there's definitely people who abused that.
No, there's a power dynamic. And like, even when you go just traveling to any, like, when I go to West Indies, I already know that the people serving at the resort see me as a cash cow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, it's not, and I'm not saying that that's what is happening in Cambodia, but I know that me coming from the US has and going there usually because I travel singularly most times, I understand what they see. I understand the dynamic there. There's no reason we need to, either one of us needs to play into that dynamic. Like, there's just not, it's not good for either one of us. Let's not, you know? So you have to know what power comes with where you're from, where you go to places and you can do good or you can self-serve.
Yeah. Yeah, and it takes a lot of self-awareness and checking yourself, and if fuck up, then being open to learning like, oh, maybe you shouldn't do that. Because
Yeah,
it's a process, but I think there's levels, there's levels to it
of
all.
course. I mean, I know also when I just go on silent retreats, I'm always like, I miss people and touch and humans, and I'm only going for a week, but I understand that, like,
You gotta
that,
send
like,
me that because I have been looking for I've wanted to go on a silent retreat since I came back home from Cambodia, and then the pandemic happened and I haven't had a chance to. I need to like disengage from speaking for a while. So
the one I go to, I'm not sure she's taking new people in person,
okay.
but if I know of something, I will definitely send it.
I'm debating just renting an Airbnb in the Catskills for a weekend, just turning my phone off.
Yeah.
I think
I
that might be.
mean, yeah. I'm doing a virtual one with this person in a couple of weeks, and I'm happy to do it because I don't see myself being able to go,
Yeah.
even though if I'm traveling, I want to go to the next one in person too. I just don't know how to fully pull that off yet. Like, I haven't figured out how to safely navigate that dynamic at this
Yeah.
point. And this is the best chance I'm going to get given how things are going to play out. But I'm also like, we'll see. So um I feel like we're near the end, but there were stories you said you would mention, and I don't know. I want to hear the stories, and I don't know what to do here because you mentioned people. You're like, oh, they'll come back later, and I'm like, but I don't know.
Oh,
Is there any really one story you want to tell us about?
I think because I had mentioned tree before,
Yeah.
and I had mentioned the bicycle, like
Yes.
how I ride bikes. So in alchemy, there's a poem that I'm gonna change the title.
Hmm.
It's called "Being Born." I'm gonna change it to "Metal Mother." So this is a journey. So go on this journey with me. So like I said, when you're away, life is still happening, and my aunt Angie passed away while I was in the village in my volunteering. Um, she was older, but it still was very sad for me. And grief is hard, and grief is really hard in isolation, and grief is even harder when you're in a different culture without the church that you would want to go to pray to. So one of my close students, her father was a monk at this really special little pagoda by these mountains near my village. Um, so I asked her if we could go and pray for my aunt one day at the pagoda. And I met up with her, and then we biked over there. It was a beautiful day. Her dad walked me around. Actually, if you see my Facebook page, you'll see a picture, like, that, like, that banner kind of,
Mm-hmm.
that's from that day. Her dad
Mm-hmm.
took me around, showed me these gorgeous sunflowers that were there. We ate lunch at the pagoda with her dad and this head monk. Um, and I got this beautiful blessing, and we prayed for my aunt. The head monk told me some crazy shit. He was like, I am your father from another lifetime, which, my dad is has been gone since I was a little.
Mm-hmm.
And he told me that me and my student were sisters. Um, he had this big bowl of water with all these different seashells and rocks and things in it, and he gave me a wooden Buddha, and he said, drop it in there, and then it floated, and he said that was good luck. Um, and it was just a very beautiful, it's one of those spaces. You probably have felt this, where you enter into a holy space and you feel it.
Mm-hmm.
It's that pagoda always was that way for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I left there in the afternoon. The monks gave me a bag of mangoes and like muffins and stuff, and I left, and I dropped those off at my host family. They were like napping, because they do that afternoon nap, which I
Mm-hmm.
wish we did too. Um,
Wouldn't it be wonderful?
it was really that was another great thing about Cambodia, afternoon nap. Um, and then I was going to bike to meet my friend Tree. She lived at the next village next door, which was maybe, it was 12 kilometers, which I don't remember how to convert into miles, but a decent, maybe a half-hour bike ride that I would do every day,
Mm-hmm.
down this one long road into the next town. And I was biking, and I was listening to Ariana Grande in my headphones, had my helmet on, doing my bike ride that I did every day around, like, 3 o'clock. And then all of a sudden, I felt like I was getting pushed from behind. And it was strange, because it my body was taking it as a joyful moment, because it reminded me of the same feeling you have when you're learning how to ride a bike and
Mm-hmm.
someone's pushing you. And that's how I felt. And then I closed my eyes. I heard a lot of sounds. And when I opened my eyes, I was belly down on the ground, and was in between truck tires. And I was looking at underneath the truck. And I was actively being run over. Um, and I remember watching the truck go and not stop, and immediately thinking, like, I have to move, because there could be a car behind this truck. And somehow I stood up, grabbed my bike, and fell and collapsed into like the dirt side of the road. Um, so it's a longer story. Um, but being born is inspired by that. Um, the truck was 2.5 tons. Um, and there's pictures and things where you can see this indent in the front of it. That was me. And the crazy thing is, I, spent 2 weeks in the hospital after then. Um, an ambulance came eventually and took me, 2.5 hours into the capital. And that ambulance ride was probably the most terrifying experience of my life, because I didn't know if I was going to die in that ambulance. I didn't know if I had internal wounds, if I was bleeding. I have scars from the neck down, um, and it's all healed now. Um, but eventually, I got to the hospital. They did, a CAT scan that or an MRI, and they had to send the results to Thailand for it to be read. And I had no broken bones, no internal injuries except for a tear in my Douglas pouch, which I didn't even know existed, somewhere in your abdomen. Um, and that's really more from the slap down. Um, my I was impaled, something under the truck, or either my body fell and ripped in a weird way right on my. So again, I am a bigger woman. My padding, I think, saved my life because I was impaled like right on my hip, kind of like right on the meat of my ass on the side. And whatever impaled me like came this close to muscle, but all my juice, all of my fat padded that. So it didn't get in, but I had a hole in my side that had to heal. My knee was technically crushed, and I had to have like a surgery to cut out some dead skin because if it wasn't modern times, it would have become a thing that became gangrene, and I would have like
Mm-hmm.
lost my knee and my leg. Um, you know, Toes kind of like shaved. Um, couldn't walk for a while until my body healed. Morphine every day. And then so 2 weeks in the hospital, and then 2 weeks on my own in a hotel room because I needed clean water to wash my wounds and stuff. And a Peace Corps doctor would come and check on me. And there was other things from this. Tree met me after I was hit on that road, and she rode the ambulance with me. Um, so she's always someone who is so special to me because I in that ambulance ride I remember turning to her and crying and saying like, why me? Why did these things happen to me? And she was the one to be like, don't even go there. Like, don't even do that. You didn't do this. Like, this just happened. You're not a victim. Like, shift that. And
Mm-hmm.
because of that, I really was able to recover in a more empowered way instead of that. Um, and so after I healed, and eventually after I healed, I went back and finished my service. I had a lot of things that I wanted to finish. I was doing a lot of projects with students and community members, and it would have felt terrible. I mean, they offered me, "Do you want to go home?" I didn't tell my family until about 2 years later. Um, I didn't tell my mom. I didn't tell I didn't tell anyone. My friends knew, but I knew that as a mother, if you tell your mom, I was just run over by a truck, she would want to come and see me. She would want me to come home. She would be terrified. She couldn't fly 24 hours on a plane to Cambodia. She couldn't afford that ticket. I didn't want to go home. So I knew that I just had to hold on to this and then tell her when I was in person in front of her and she could see me and know I was okay. Um, so to connect the dots for a little bit more of my story, um, while I was recovering in that hotel room, my Peace Corps doctor would visit me every day and check my wounds and check on me. And that's when the doctor was like, what's your plan for after service? And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, I would love to, I don't really know. I just got run over by a truck. I'm not really sure. But I would love to maybe work at like a university someday. I thought about staying in Cambodia, but I don't know. And so Linda gave me an email to one of her friends who was developing the English department at this medical university, and she said, "Send your resume in." Um, and so I did. And then from there, after I finished my service, went back home, which was a whole other thing. It's so strange to return or open up a book bag and look at things as if what if you had What if this was a bag that people had found? You know,
Mm,
what if this was a dead girl's items? Um, and so having that kind of reckoning of a near death experience, um, and then finishing, and then going home for a little bit, visiting my family after, I had maybe 4 months left after that. When I came back home after I finished my Peace Corps service, wore long sleeves, long pants. My mom thought that maybe I had gotten a tattoo or something. Um, but she knew I was hiding something from her. She told me because I told her the next year. Because while I was home for that first trip in between volunteering and working in the capital, a different aunt passed away. And I knew that my family needed space to grieve that, and I didn't want to get into that about me yet. So I told my family the next time I came home at Sunday dinner. They were all there, and my brother asked about one of these scars. Yeah, my elbows have healed pretty well, but I think my brother asked about a scar, and I was like, my whole family's here. I'm sitting at the seat my dad used to sit at. Now is the time. So, being born, which will now be known as Metal Mother when I release the second kind of version of Alchemy, was inspired by that story. And yeah, so that was bringing Tree back in, the bicycle. Um, and now I kind of click a little bit. I got this weird kind of space in my knee that looks really strange. I have this weird scar on my side that I just tell people, yeah, it was a hole. um, Sewed that up, and now we move, and now we're back. And now people won't know that unless I tell them that story. Um, and it's something I just March 1st, 2017 is when that happened. So about 5 years ago. No.
wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Crazy shit. Yeah, it was wild.
I didn't put that story there. Like, I didn't put that poem there. I don't know why. I don't even think I put that poem. I put that poem in a car,
Hmm.
like vehicle to vehicle, and I don't know why. Um,
Collision, an accident, your body
yeah.
something.
So thank you for sharing
Yeah.
all of that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Crazy. It was a lot. So that's what I mean. Like coming home in 2019 after, plus I fell in love on when I was traveling, and that was a whole thing. Brokenhearted coming back 2019 with all that
Mm,
on my body, heart, and mind. Um, it was a lot to process, and I feel a little emotionally backlogged.
mhm,
So now we're on book two, which is trying to process all that stuff because Alchemy was printed while I was there. I wrote that
wow.
and printed all of the books in Phnom Penh in Cambodia. The guy I loved was the graphic designer. And yeah, Malaysian dude. I loved him. Yeah.
Oh,
So
okay.
much. I know it's a lot.
I
It's a
mean, yeah, there's like a, yeah, okay. I might just have to get to know you better because
yeah,
there's so much I just want to know about you that came up in this conversation.
likewise.
And I'm just
Likewise.
like,
Thank you.
yeah. So I have three more questions for you.
Sure.
One of which is, since you talked about this poem so much, would you be willing to read
Yeah,
it?
yeah. Being
Okay. Yeah.
I don't have it memorized. I did at one point in my life. I don't have it now, but I have it. And
I have almost nothing memorized anymore.
yeah, it's something I want to work on more, but I think there's still some value in just reading, and so thank you. Um, so this is being born, but now metal mother. Getting hit by a truck is a lot like being born. First, you will feel the push, and you will not know where the force is coming from, but it will be strong, and you will be scared. And then your body will bend into ways it has prepared for. Your body knows how to fold and collapse into itself. It has held its limbs in the dark for many nights. And today you will do this again. Once more. This time a little differently. This time in daylight. This time 26. This time you are born from a metal mother. And like last, you will not have time to question it. Instinct comes from within, and after you will wonder where instinct is written in the body and who wrote it there for you to do all you can do to live. This instinct will guide you, but the spaces will get smaller and warm sunlight will become shadow and the sounds will get louder and it will hurt and it will hurt and it will hurt. And if you are lucky, you will scream loudly because it will mean you are alive. And if you are lucky, you will have all of your limbs, 10 toes, 10 fingers, your figure whole and humming like a hymn. And your face, your beautiful face, will be just fine. But the pain will be ugly. And you will open your eyes as the agony hits and your human mouth will wail the universal animal sound of suffering. It's the kind of crying for your mother. And when she cannot hear you, you will cry with the grandmother who is kneeling next to you. This one does not speak your language, but she will wrap you in a fabric, rub your heart, and hold your hand as if you were her own. And you will never know her name. And then you will cry for yourself. Cry because it hurts. Because being alive is painful. Because what a beautifully painful miracle it is to be alive. The understanding comes after. Who you were before is not who you are now, and you do not know who you will be. But you do know that getting hit by a truck is a whole lot like being born. So cry. Cry because you were born. Cry because you are still breathing. So that's being born. You know, what's wild is I still have so as I was laying on the ground, my clothes, I lost my shoes, my pants were all torn up because I think I got dragged, maybe, I really don't know. But this grandmother, this older Cambodian woman, came out and she put a sarong on me, and I think I still have it. I have it in my closet. I wore it to the hospital. Yeah. So this was from her.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's special.
Yeah, that's the fabric. And you know, it was just something that I will never forget, and I'm grateful to be alive. And it was also the moment that I knew that I could never commit suicide. As much as I've struggled with depression in my life, the moment that I was on the ground after the truck hit me, I felt you have to get up. You have to get up and get off the road because I don't want to die. I had to I called the Peace Corps. I dug for my phone, which didn't break, those Nokia phones. The Peace Corps gives you a Nokia, and
they knew why they get to give it to you.
Yeah. And you know, I did the calls that I had to make sure I got help because I didn't want to die. Although there's so many times in my life I did want to die. And I still even feel that at times now, but now I know I can never do that. I've been given an opportunity to be alive when I very well could have died or been traumatized brain wise or lost a limb didn't even, lose a tooth or anything. And it's really crazy.
You know what's amazing about that is really, you know, I just for I am not a person with a lot of issue, and you will almost never hear me talk about a lot of my ailments. But I'm always in pain. Something's always hurting with me. And I don't really talk about it because why?
Yeah.
But one of the things I go back to sometimes when I'm in more pain than not is like, you know what? But I'm not walking with a walker anymore. and and because I had a surgery in 2007 that almost killed me, and it was just my gallbladder, but like they botched the surgery and almost killed me on the table. And I was in, so I had the full surgery. Like, so most people like, oh, I had my gallbladder. I was like, yeah, yeah, we ain't had the same surgery. Like, trust me, we ain't had. Did you end up in ICU for 4 days? Oh no, you didn't. Okay, great, not the same surgery. You know, and I'm like, because whenever you say, people are like, oh, not we not having the same conversation. I only heard one gallbladder story that was worse than mine, and I was so happy. I wasn't happy for her story, but I was happy that someone else had a terrible gallbladder story
Yeah. Yeah.
in current times. Because like before, everyone had the full surgery, but then we started doing laparoscopic stuff,
Yeah.
and so everyone who has it now has a successful laparoscopic surgery. Minus me and this one other woman whose story was so much worse than mine that I was like, yes, you know.
Thank God you survived it. You both.
Yeah. And like the fact that like when I'm in pain and I'm limping, like yesterday my stomach was so messed up, I was walking like at an angle.
Yes.
And but like when I'm in like these terrible places sometimes, and I don't know that I have always been like I don't want to take my life, but I definitely know when I'm in more pain, I'm like, but you know what, I'm not walking for Walker.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
remember that. Like I remember I am not bent over with a walker right now. So I'm not having a nurse change me, clean me, do any of that
Yeah.
stuff.
So humbling.
And as much as those baths were wonderful in the nursing, like in the hospital, like, oh, those sponge baths were amazing. I don't have to have a sponge bath. you know, it is nice to not to be able to take care of myself.
I
And so once you have that thing that takes away so much from you from a moment, that it's like, okay, yeah, like I get to function in a way. You get to appreciate what you have so much more when you did not have it physically. Even if
Yeah.
you're not in the best of places, you can still go, oh no, but I was there before. I think your experience is definitely such a heightened one because I couldn't even imagine. Um, but it's what you've done with it just poetically and what you've done with it as a life. The fact that you were like, nah, but send me back in, that alone is huge. Let me
I
finish the stuff I started. I ain't finished yet, like just coming in with that and not giving up is huge. Um, so one, I hope you always remember that you can accomplish anything. Because that is, if you did that, man, you can do anything.
didn't do it alone though. That's why those Peace Corps friends, they were at my hospital bedside. Those are people that helped me through it too.
And I'm glad you said that because so many people forget the people who got you through. Like I will forever. I hated a lot of my nurses. I had one nurse who could never do the blood drawing when someone was around.
Hmm.
It's like, this is you were in the wrong
Yeah.
profession, man. Her bedside man, and I had another, when you're in a surgical room area, they're always coming in to check your blood and take and harass you, so you never sleep. Um, and so I had one phlebotomist or nurse that was like a terrible bedside manner, got mad at me for being scared when you woke me up out of my sleep. But I had this one nurse whose name was Christian. And my favorite times at night was when Christian was on duty. And Christian was just so, and I remember her name was Christian because I don't think I ever met a woman named Christian before. And I this is 15 years ago, am I saying something like that? And the fact that she still stays in my head is such an amazing person to get me through that. And I remember the friends who visited me in the hospital, the ones who tried to. And people keep forgetting that you never do anything alone. As much as you think you did, there's nothing you've accomplished alone.
Yeah.
Even when there's a whole bunch of people saying no to you, the odds are good there was someone saying yes. There was someone behind the scenes giving you that opportunity or pushing you or something. And so don't forget that. So I definitely appreciate that you have your network that holds you to, that held you together, and that I'm glad you guys are still connected after these years. So that's huge. So my last two questions. The first one, is there a way, or how do we support your community or those that we know that are out there doing the work?
Yeah. So in terms of the Peace Corps, they're actually like just returning now after like post COVID. I think the first cohort of Cambodian um, Peace Corps volunteers just left recently. So I would, if you want to support the Peace Corps, I would look on the peacecorps.gov website and see if that's something you want to support. But more than anything, I would really just recommend you and all of us should. I mean, it's a trope, but community is what makes us, and we have our communities wherever we are. So speak to your local deli, ask the people around you at the deli, at the stores, how are you? Connect on a human level. Try to connect on a human level and remember that, especially in New York, we move so fast. Um, so yeah, I would let people decide if you want to support the Peace Corps. If you wanted to apply, that's a whole other cool thing too. But in terms of poetry and Staten Island poetry and Staten Island community, we're trying to rebuild now after the pandemic, and there's always a lot of cool things happening. So you can always come to the island, support us. A lot of people forget about Staten Island, and it's unfortunate because there's so many great storytellers here with stories to tell. So just come on down.
Yeah, I interviewed Thomas Fukaloro,
Thomas, yeah.
a couple. He was one of my earlier interviews, and he spoke on behalf of the New York poetry scene slash the Staten Island group. And we talked about how, by virtue of our mutual friend, I have really got, I mean, I knew Thomas before. I knew Jacob before. I knew a few of y'all before, in the before times. But getting to know y'all more, getting to see what's happening out there, I'm really impressed by the community you guys foster. And there's something different about it that is a lot more love. And maybe I'm just seeing it because as an outsider, but there's a love and appreciation and camaraderie and support that just happens that's different. Um, and I wish the other boroughs moved like that a little bit more.
I think it's a product of being the underdog. So
Mm,
that
yeah.
it kind of brings us all together because we're not doing it to be cool. We're doing it because we have to. Like, I have to do this. Whereas sometimes it's a little bit different in some other boroughs. Now, there's some great poetry communities in Brooklyn and Manhattan and everywhere that I love, and the Bronx and Queens. But there is something different about Staten Island because we get shit on all the time. So we've got to support each other, so we can, still build community in that way. So thank you for recognizing it. There is a lot of love. The poetry community made me,
Mm,
definitely made me.
that's amazing. And so also the last question, how do we support slash follow you?
Yeah, so I'm actually building my website now, which should launch soon, jennythepoet.com. But I think the easiest way is on Instagram, Jenny the Poet. That's my poetry page. You
Jenny
can,
with a Y.
yeah,
Okay.
Jenny, the poet, no spaces, no underscore, just one whole thing. And that's my poetry page. I have my personal page, Jenny Lovegood. Sometimes I'm still figuring it out. I struggle with social media and all that. But yeah, I'm working on making some new prints of alchemy, which was titled because, I think maybe you understand some of the things I went through and how I had to transform it into something.
Mm,
So that's where alchemy came from. And now I'm working on the second book. of poems I've written since then, which should
Mm.
be coming out soon.
So thank you, Jenny,
Thank you. Thank you.
for being part of this conversation. It has been a gift. I I'm really happy to have had this conversation. I'm really happy for so many levels, for so many reasons. The conversation we had before we started recording, the conversation we've had since we started recording, the conversations we will have going forward. You are not getting to go away from my life, just so you know, you're permanently part of it. Um, thank you everyone who has listened to this episode. Please, please, please support Jenny, because she is dynamic, as you heard in this episode. I really, really loved Alchemy. I enjoyed it. And like I said, there's at least like 2 or 3 poems that I read multiple times, just because I was like, I resonated it with so much. So I look forward to what you write next and what you release next, because dynamic. Yeah, so that all said, thank you for listening to this episode of On Behalf of. If you want to support, please hit that subscribe button, tell other people to listen to it or watch it, depending on how you engage with this. And there's also a subscription page on, I think, either Anchor or Spotify, where you can actually just, I don't give you any perks because I ain't got time to give you perks, but there is a monthly subscription. So if you want to support me financially, that would be wonderful, because, you know, this art hustle costs money and time, and it's just exhausting. So, but I love it. But, you know, also, guys, you know, Black women labor ain't really for free, but it's for free. So anyway, that all said, join us next time on Behalf of, and I will speak to you all soon. Thank you again, Jenny, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.